Hey guys, tonight we step through the glowing gates of Benin City, where the walls themselves shimmer like polished brass and the air hums with the rhythm of unseen hammers. You're not just watching history tonight, you're walking straight into it, barefoot on red earth still warm from the forge fires of centuries past. The night smells like charcoal and palm oil, and somewhere nearby, a drum taps slowly, like a heartbeat trying not to wake the gods. You can almost taste the metal dust drifting through the humid air. It coats your tongue with the faint bitterness of stories too old to be told lightly. You probably won't survive this kind of time travel, at least not without singed eyebrows. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where these journeys reach you from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The city glows like a constellation fallen to earth. Massive earthen walls, some taller than houses, encircle you, built by hands that never knew the word impossible. These are the walls of Benin, once the beating heart of a mighty kingdom in what is now southern Nigeria. Historians still argue whether these fortifications were the largest earthworks ever created before modern machinery, but as you trace your fingers along the packed clay, you realize that the argument doesn't matter. The proof is under your fingertips, solid and unyielding. You follow the flicker of torches down a path lined with carved wooden posts. Each carving is a face, elongated, regal, serene, gazing forever toward the Oba's palace. That's the king. The Oba, divine ruler of Benin, believed to be the bridge between mortals and the spirit world. His court hums with ritual, protocol, and the smell of palm wine. But tonight your attention is pulled elsewhere, to the rhythmic hammering echoing from beyond the courtyard walls. That's the Igun Street, the sacred quarter of bronze casters.
The sound isn't random noise. It's a pulse, a code. A metallic language passed down for generations. You realize each hammer strike is deliberate, an incantation of metal. The Igun Eronwun Guild, whose name means bronze workers, live and breathe by this sound. For centuries, they've transformed molten copper alloys into divine portraits, royal plaques, and intricate reliefs that tell stories more vividly than any book ever could. The torchlight catches something in the dirt, a shard of metal, half buried, glinking faintly. You bend down, brushing the red dust away. It's smooth on one side, jagged on the other, a fragment of something once alive with pattern. You're holding a piece of a forgotten face, maybe a cheek from one of those legendary Benin bronzes that would one day baffle European explorers. You pocket it instinctively, even though you suspect the spirits might not approve. Factually speaking, the Benin bronzes weren't pure bronze, but a complex mixture of copper, tin, and sometimes brass, melted and shaped through the ancient lost wax technique. The process is almost magical, though we'll get to that secret later. For now, the thought lingers. Somewhere in this city, people can make metal breathe. The hum of the marketplace reaches your ears next. Women with baskets of kola nuts and pepper trade jokes as quick as their hands. A child tugs at your sleeve, his skin glowing from oil and moonlight, offering a carved ivory pendant. You notice how even in everyday life, art is everywhere, woven into fabric, traced into hairlines, etched on walls. It's as though Benin itself refuses to separate the sacred from the ordinary. There's a rumor you overhear, whispered by a merchant chewing on bitter leaves. He says that sometimes, on quiet nights, the bronze heads in the Oba's palace turn their eyes ever so slightly toward the moon. Maybe it's just a trick of the light, he shrugs, but others say it's the ancestors checking in, making sure the living haven't forgotten who they are. Historians still argue whether these heads represented specific kings or idealized ancestors, but either way, the feeling they give off is alive.
You walk further, past the palace gates carved with crocodiles and leopards, symbols of royal power. The crocodile devours without mercy, while the leopard strikes without warning. Together they embody the Oba's authority, silent, swift, absolute. Somewhere behind those gates, ceremonies unfold that outsiders rarely witness. The bronze caster's works aren't mere decorations, they are spiritual anchors, vessels meant to hold the Oba's essence, binding the living to the divine. One elder pauses his work as you pass. His skin gleams with sweat and soot, and his eyes flicker like the coals at his feet. He grins, toothless but proud. "We make what does not die," he murmurs, before turning back to his fire. You're not sure if he means the art or the soul. The night thickens. The air is sweet with burning resin. You can feel the weight of centuries pressing against you as though the city itself is aware of your presence. Every whisper of wind carries fragments of chants, prayers, maybe even laughter from artisans long gone. You catch sight of something strange near a cluster of huts, a mound of beeswax shaped vaguely like a human head. It sits half hidden beneath palm fronds, glistening faintly. Someone's preparing a mold. You don't know it yet, but you're looking at the first stage of a ritual that has survived hundreds of years, passed from father to son, never written down, never spoken aloud outside the guild. And here's the quirky part. Legend has it that before a casting, some artists used to mix crocodile dung into the wax, claiming it made the metal bite harder. Whether that's chemistry or just superstition, you can't help imagining an apprentice nervously explaining that to his master. "Yes, sir, it's artisanal crocodile dung." The drums quicken. Somewhere in the city, the Oba's herald announces a ceremony, perhaps the commissioning of a new bronze. You can almost sense the tension building, as if the whole city holds its breath in anticipation of creation itself. You realize something unsettling. You've stopped thinking of the bronzes as art. They feel more like living witnesses, metal memories capable of speaking if only you knew their language. As you step closer to the forge light, the shadows ripple across the walls, shapes of masks, animals, faces. The artisans move like dancers, guided by something more than muscle memory. You feel the heat, the hum, the heartbeat of Benin itself pulsing through the ground beneath your feet. And as the molten glow of the furnace paints your face gold, one thought crystallizes. You've barely crossed the threshold. The real secret lies not in the shine of the finished bronze, but in the mystery of how it becomes one.
The clangs grow sharper as you follow the sound toward Egun Street, that long living artery of the bronze casting guild. The air thickens with smoke and the heavy scent of melted metal. You can feel the temperature rise even before you step into the narrow courtyard where a dozen small furnaces glow like tiny suns. Sparks leap into the night, swirling like fireflies that lost their way home. You blink against the brightness, your eyes watering as you realize you've just stepped into one of the oldest artists' guilds on earth, the Egun Eronwon, keepers of a sacred craft bound by blood, tradition, and molten copper. No one greets you at first. The artisans work silently, each man and woman enclosed in their own trance. Their skin glistens with oil and heat, and their hands move with eerie precision. It's not chaos, it's choreography. One stirs a crucible, another adjusts the clay molds, whispering under his breath. You get the sense that even the silence between hammer strikes carries weight. These aren't just blacksmiths, they're priests of the forge. Historians still argue whether their secrets came from independent innovation or from centuries-old contact with travelers from across the Sahara, maybe even the Portuguese. Some say the techniques were born right here, nurtured in the red soil of Benin long before outsiders arrived. Others insist the artistry was sparked by distant influences that mingled with local genius. But right now, standing here, it doesn't matter. Every clang tells you this is something indigenous, something alive, an unbroken rhythm of hands and fire passed through countless generations. A young apprentice glances your way. He's maybe 15, his hair dusted with ash, his wrists ringed with thin copper bands. He grins, amused by your gawking expression, and gestures for you to step closer. "Watch," he says softly. "The bees teach us everything." He points to a block of golden wax sitting on a flat stone. It looks almost edible, like honey solidified mid-pour. With a small bronze spatula, he begins to shape the wax into delicate coils, building a tiny head, the start of a sculpture that will later become metal.
You realize the phrase lost wax isn't poetic, it's literal. The entire wax form will be swallowed by clay, melted away, and replaced by bronze. The bees give their wax, the artists give their breath, the fire gives it life. Wax is memory, the boy says, rolling a fine strand between his fingers. If you press too hard, it forgets the shape. You smile, half because that sounds impossibly wise for someone his age, and half because you're sure your fingers would have snapped it already. The guild elder approaches. His name is Omoregebe, and his eyes glint like old metal. He's draped in a red cloth, the color reserved for those who serve the Oba directly. He lifts a piece of finished waxwork, a mask with hollow eyes and intricate coral bead patterns, and nods toward the furnace. Tonight, we feed the fire a soul. You're not entirely sure whether he's joking. He leads you to a clay pit where several molds dry under banana leaves. Each mold hides a wax sculpture inside, invisible but waiting. The process is precise. The wax model is covered in layers of fine clay, each one drying before the next is applied. When it's ready, it's heated gently so the wax melts out, leaving a hollow shell. Then, molten metal, usually brass or bronze, is poured in to fill that void. When it cools, the clay is broken, and what emerges is an exact metal twin of the original wax form. But before that final pour, there's ritual. Always ritual. The elder sprinkles chalk around the molds, marking a circle that you instinctively know you shouldn't step inside. He hums a low tone, joined by the other artisans, a harmony that feels older than language. The apprentices bow their heads. You can smell something faintly sweet, like crushed flowers mixed with oil. Here's the quirky bit. Some early European visitors claimed the guild members could tell when a casting would fail because they'd dream of cracked masks the night before. One even swore he saw a priest throw a small frog into the furnace to calm the spirit of the metal. You're not sure whether that's colonial exaggeration or an authentic glimpse into the blend of spirituality and craft. But either way, it adds a new meaning to leap of faith. Omornigebe dips his fingers into palm oil and anoints the mold.
"Every casting," he says, "is a promise. If the promise breaks, the spirit leaves the work hollow." You nod, half understanding, half dazzled by the slow dance of preparation. He hands you a small piece of beeswax. "Hold this," he says. It's soft and faintly warm from the night air. He presses your hand closed around it. That's how it starts. The wax remembers the heat of your hand. The bronze remembers the heat of the fire. And we remember both. You stand quietly as they begin to pour. The crucible tips, releasing a stream of glowing gold into the clay channels. The hiss is almost alive, like an exhale of relief. Everyone watches, No one speaks. The only sound is the soft roar of the metal as it settles into the mold. It's over in seconds, yet it feels like you've witnessed an entire lifetime condensed into that pour. When it's done, they cover the molds with ash and let them cool. Omoregbe turns to you, smiling faintly. "Tomorrow," he says, "we'll see if the gods approve." You glance at the apprentices, who are already laughing softly, wiping sweat and soot from their faces. Someone cracks a joke about the metal gods needing better aim next time. Even here, in the sacred guild, humor is a survival tool, especially when your job involves molten death traps on a nightly basis. You look around at the small homes lining the courtyard. Each doorway has a bronze plaque nailed above it, a family emblem, a silent resume carved in metal. Lions, fish, leopards, even stylized human faces glare down at you from every wall. This isn't just art, it's genealogy. Each household keeps the faces of its ancestors nearby, ensuring that every strike of the hammer is done under their watchful gaze. Historians still argue whether these workshops operated as autonomous artisan families or under strict royal supervision, but it's clear the guild's loyalty lies with the Oba. Every casting begins and ends with prayers for him. Some even say the Oba's breath is metaphorically cast into the bronze itself, binding the king to every work created in his name. You wander toward a corner where a child sleeps beside a pile of broken molds. The clay shards look like bones, scattered and fragile. And yet, from these ruins, new art will rise tomorrow. You're struck by the cycle of it all. Build, burn, pour, reveal, repeat. Nothing is truly lost, only reshaped. And maybe that's the secret lesson hidden beneath all this craftsmanship. Every loss, every melt, every mistake is just another chance for transformation. The wax disappears, but it leaves behind something stronger. The drums start again, slower now, deeper. You realize it's not just music. It's the sound of cooling bronze contracting inside its clay shell, echoing like a heartbeat through the night. You close your eyes and listen. For a moment, you could swear the city itself is breathing with you. When you open them again, the courtyard glows softer, the fires dimming, the artisans stretching their tired limbs. The elder nods at you approvingly this time and says, "Tomorrow you'll see the face in the fire." You don't yet know what that means, but you'll find out soon enough.
By dawn, the air tastes like cooled metal and wet clay. The fires from the night before have quieted into small sighs of smoke. You find yourself back in the courtyard, barefoot this time, because Amoregbe insists that the earth should feel your feet before the spirits do. The apprentices are already at work, chipping away at the clay molds. The cracking sounds echo like dry thunder, and one by one, the new bronzes begin to appear. Faces, masks, animals, scenes of royal processions emerging from their clay cocoons. You kneel beside one, brushing away the dust. The surface still glows faintly from heat, the details impossibly sharp. A warrior's face stares back at you, expression calm but unyielding, coral beads circling his neck like a halo. You half expect him to blink. You remember Omoregbe's words. Tomorrow you'll see the face inside the fire. Now you understand. The craftsmen crowd around, admiring each piece with quiet pride. There's no cheering, no applause, just murmured gratitude and the soft sound of palms brushing over metal, as if each work needs to be blessed by touch. One apprentice kisses the forehead of a small bronze leopard before setting it on a mat to cool. You're not sure if it's ritual or affection. Maybe both. The elder gestures toward the line of finished bronzes. These are not just faces, he says softly.
They are doors. You tilt your head, unsure what he means. Doors? To the spirit world, he answers. The wax dies so the metal can live, and the metal lives so that memory never dies. He walks over to a carved shrine in the corner of the courtyard where small offerings, kola nuts, feathers, beads, are placed before a soot-darkened altar. A half-burned candle flickers beside it. He continues, "Before we cast, we speak to the wax. We tell it what it will become. Then, when the fire takes it, the spirit knows where to go." Historians still argue whether these rituals were purely symbolic or whether the bronze casters truly believed they were trapping souls inside metal, but watching Omoregbe's hands move reverently across the altar, you get the feeling that the line between symbol and belief doesn't exist here. It's all the same living truth.
He picks up a small clay pot filled with water and pours a few drops on the ground. Steam rises instantly, carrying the faint scent of iron. "The ancestors," he murmurs, "always listen through the smoke." You can't help smiling. There's something poetic about a culture that treats metalwork like prayer. Even the scientific process, the lost wax casting, the careful alloying of copper and tin feels like a sermon in motion. And yet there's mystery in it too. You remember reading somewhere that some of these bronzes were so technically advanced, European metallurgists couldn't believe they were pre-industrial. Some even accused early collectors of faking them. But you've seen the truth now. The skill was real, born from patience, not machines. As the morning wears on, the apprentices polish each piece using fine sand and palm leaves. The rhythmic rubbing sounds like rain on rooftops. You notice one of them muttering softly as he works, and when you ask what he's saying, he replies, "I'm teaching it to remember its name." You can't tell if he's joking, but he doesn't look up when he says it. Here's the quirky part. Omoregbe tells you that sometimes before casting a particularly important head, the guild used to bury a charm under the furnace, a mixture of browned powder, chalk, and dried fish scales. "The fish," he says, "teaches the metal how to swim through the fire." You bite your lip to keep from laughing out loud, but he catches your expression and grins. You think it's funny? Wait until you see one breathe. You're not sure if he's teasing or being literal, but you're intrigued enough to stay quiet. Later that afternoon, the bronzes are carried to the Oba's palace for inspection. You walk with the guild through the crowded streets, their arms cradling the heavy pieces like newborns. The city is alive again, drummers beating slow rhythms, market women calling out prices, children chasing one another with carved sticks. Yet even amidst the noise, there's reverence. People step aside as the bronzes pass, bowing slightly. It's not the artists they honor, it's the spirits within the metal.
Inside the palace courtyard, everything glitters. Coral beads, brass bells, ivory carvings, these symbols of royalty are everywhere. The Oba himself sits beneath a canopy of red and gold, his expression unreadable, his body draped in coral regalia that catches the sunlight like embers. You feel the weight of history pressing down on the moment. Omoregbe kneels and presents the new bronzes. The Oba's attendants inspect them closely, murmuring approval. When one attendant accidentally brushes his hand against a still warm piece, he flinches and whispers something quickly in Edo, the local tongue. Omoregbe smiles. "He felt the spirit," he says. The Oba nods slowly, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You have captured their likeness," he declares, his voice deep and resonant. "They will remember us when we are gone." And that's the moment it hits you. The real purpose behind all this. These bronzes aren't vanity projects. They're the kingdom's hard drive, a backup of memory and lineage. Each casting preserves a person, a story, an emotion. The wax dies, yes, but its soul endures in the cool permanence of metal. You catch your reflection in one of the plaques, your face distorted, half shadow, half gold. For a second, you wonder what your own soul would look like if someone tried to cast it this way. Probably something lumpy and slightly melted, like a rushed art project. The ceremony ends quietly. As the artisans file out, Omoregbe pats your shoulder. "Now you know," he says. "The fire doesn't just make bronze, it makes memory solid." But as night falls again, you feel a strange unease. You pass a row of older bronzes displayed in the shrine, a lineup of faces so lifelike they seem to be breathing. You lean closer and notice tiny imperfections, cracks like wrinkles, dark patinas that shimmer faintly when the torchlight flickers. It's unsettling how human they feel, as if they are not merely remembering but watching. Historians still argue whether these works were made to honor the dead or to contain them. You can't say which is true. All you know is that when you look too long into those metal eyes, you start to feel as if something ancient and unblinking is looking back. The drums start again, distant but steady. You think about the fish charm, the whispered prayers, the wax that forgets nothing. You start to suspect that maybe Omoregbe wasn't exaggerating when he said some bronzes breathe. And as you walk away from the palace, the night folds around you, warm and metallic. You can almost hear it, the faint sound of bronze lungs inhaling, exhaling, whispering names you don't yet know.
The next morning opens with a haze that smells like smoke and palm wine. The streets of Benin City are quieter now, as if the air itself is nursing a hangover from last night's rituals. You wander back toward Igun Street, where the artisans are already at work, polishing, engraving, and buffing the newly cast bronzes until they shine like bottled sunlight. Each piece, even in its early state, feels timeless. You can sense something uncanny here. The bronzes don't just depict history, they hold it. You watch one craftsman, older, lean, with arms like braided rope, take a narrow chisel and begin carving details into a plaque. Every line he etches feels deliberate, controlled. The scene taking shape shows soldiers with spears, marching behind a regal figure. You lean in closer, tracing the outlines with your eyes. The plaque tells a story, one of conquest or maybe ceremony, but the artisan doesn't need words. The metal speaks its own language, and you're just beginning to understand. He glances up and grins. "You see the Oba?" he asks. "Always taller than the others." He taps the royal figure's headdress. "That's how we remind everyone who leads." You smile, realizing that in Benin's art, scale equals importance. The bigger the figure, the greater the spirit. In a way, these bronzes are like ancient social media posts, carefully curated images that broadcast power and memory to anyone who looks. And yet, unlike a post, these works won't vanish into the scroll of time. They'll outlast everyone who ever touched them. The artisan gestures toward a row of displayed heads nearby, resting on wooden pedestals. "These," he says proudly, "are the ancestors of the ancestors." You approach, half in awe, half in reverence. The heads, cast in rich, glowing brass, are astonishingly lifelike. They depict Obas long gone, their faces serene, eyes slightly downcast as though contemplating eternity. Historians still argue whether these heads were intended as portraits of specific rulers or as idealized embodiments of divine kingship. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. But when you look into their steady eyes, you feel something more personal, like standing before someone who knows your thoughts before you've spoken them.
You move closer. The surface of one head ripples faintly under the light, the intricate coral beads of the crown catching every glint of the morning sun. You reach out, hesitant, and the metal is cold, eerily cold, as if it has no memory of the furnace that birthed it. Omoregbe appears beside you, silent for a while, then says, "The fire gives them life, but time teaches them patience." He leads you to another section of the workshop, where plaques hang on the walls like a bronze tapestry. You see battles, royal audiences and processions, tiny figures crammed into intricate reliefs. Each scene is crowded but deliberate, full of rhythm. The same patterns of life repeat. The Oba at the center, warriors at his side, attendants carrying gifts or weapons, animals woven into the background like symbols from a dream. You realize that each plaque is not just decoration, it's documentation. Before paper, before ink, before written chronicles, this was how Benin kept its history. Every stroke of the chisel is an archive entry, every burnished surface a page in an unending book of metal. The kingdom's triumphs, alliances, and spiritual visions all live here, fixed in brass, but never static. Even now, Omoregbe says, we don't carve from imagination, we carve from memory. He taps his temple. If you forget the story, the bronze will not listen. The idea that metal could listen strikes you as poetic, until you recall how alive these faces seemed the night before. Maybe it isn't a metaphor after all. The afternoon drifts into a slow rhythm of polishing and storytelling. The apprentices laugh, trading tales of miscast molds and cursed furnaces that coughed back metal like a dragon rejecting its dinner. You chuckle too, but one story silences the laughter. An older caster recalls a time when an entire casting went wrong. The metal bubbled violently, bursting through its mold like a living thing. They said it was because the wax modeler had forgotten to perform the ritual of whispering the sculpture's name before the pour. The spirit didn't know where to go, the elder explains, shrugging, so it went everywhere. You can't decide if he's joking, or if he's still haunted by the memory.
That evening, as the sun dips low, you walk through the palace again. The Oba's attendants are arranging bronzes on carved wooden stands. The air feels dense, saturated with quiet awe. You notice how the light from the torches flickers across the metal faces, making them appear to breathe in the half-darkness. You swear one of the plaque's eyes glinted brighter when you pass. Here's the quirky bit. One of the attendants whispers that during certain festivals, the Oba would pour libations of palm wine directly onto some of the bronze heads to, quote, feed them. They like it sweet, he says, smirking, just like the old kings. You imagine ancient spirits tipsy on palm wine, gossiping about their descendants, and it almost makes you laugh, until you realize he isn't kidding. The mood shifts when Omoregbe calls you to the courtyard's edge. There, beneath a canopy of palm fronds, lies an unfinished piece, a massive plaque showing the Oba seated on a throne, surrounded by attendants. The artisans are debating how to capture the right expression on his face. We want him to look wise, one says. No, another counters, he must look eternal. Historians still argue whether the expression on these bronzes was symbolic of divinity or realism. You can see both in their discussion, the tension between portraying a man and preserving a god. Omoregbe chuckles softly. The Oba is both, he says. That's why we never get the face exactly right. No one ever can. You realize this perfection they chase isn't about technique, it's about reverence. The act of trying, of striving to represent the unrepresentable is the devotion. As night falls, you find yourself standing in the flickering glow of dozens of bronzes displayed in the open courtyard. The air feels electric, the silence deep. One by one, the torches gutter out until only a few embers remain. The bronzes gleam faintly in the half-light, as if lit from within. You stand perfectly still, afraid to break the moment. You hear Omoregbe behind you, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you see why they last? You nod slowly. Because they're made of metal. He chuckles. No, because they remember being wax. You don't understand at first, but as he turns and walks away, the thought lingers like heat after a flame. Maybe that's the secret of Benin's bronzes. They remember their soft beginnings, their fragile, mortal origins. They were wax once, they were human once, and that memory keeps them alive.
The night air cools. The sound of distant drums floats through the trees. You take one last look at the line of bronze faces shimmering in the dark and realize something you can't quite put into words. They've become more than art. They're echoes, solidified breaths of an empire determined never to fade.
The heat shift before the history does. You can feel it, that subtle change in the rhythm of the forge, the nervous crackle in the air. The Igun street you've come to know, with its laughter and smoke and beeswax scent, grows quieter. Fewer hammers ring through the mornings now. The older casters mutter among themselves about traders, about strange foreigners building roads where spirits walk. And somewhere, far beyond the walls of Benin, you can sense the coming storm of another kind of fire, the kind that doesn't create. It starts small, as these things often do. Rumors of men in white linen, ships with iron bellies, and voices that carry across the water. At first, it's excitement. The Portuguese have long come and gone, trading brass and coral, their ships leaving behind both metal and myth. But now there are new visitors, English traders, missionaries, explorers, each carrying gifts in one hand and ledgers in the other. You walk through the market and notice the difference immediately. Imported brass bracelets glint on stalls beside local ones. Gunpowder, salt, mirrors, things that once felt magical are now bargaining chips. The city smells of change, a metallic tang sharper than any forge. Omoreregbe frowns when you mention the foreign ships. They come with smiles, he says, but they measure everything with eyes that count too quickly. He's right. The bronze casters begin melting down imported brass from European trade goods, especially from old Manilas, those horseshoe-shaped bracelets once used as currency. The irony isn't lost on you. The tools of commerce, feeding the art of memory. Historians still argue whether the influx of European brass expanded the craft or diluted its ritual purity. But Omoreregbe only shrugs. Metal is metal, he says. It remembers whoever holds it last. The days blur into uneasy calm. You spend evenings with the artisans as they continue their work, though their songs grow shorter, more somber. The Oba still commissions bronzes, but his eyes are distant. Whispers travel like smoke, of treaties, refusals, accusations, of British consuls demanding open trade, and Benin's refusal to bow.
Then, one dawn, the city wakes to thunder. Except this time it isn't from the forge. The sky burns gray as columns of smoke rise where the palace once shimmered. The sound is unbearable. Crackling wood, shouts, the alien roar of gunfire. You run through the streets as red dust and ash swirl together, choking the air. The same paths that once carried processions of bronzes now run with footprints and fear. You hear someone scream, "They've taken the Oba!" but you can't tell who. Through the chaos you glimpse a figure you think is Omoregbe, dragging a heavy bundle wrapped in cloth. You help him carry it toward the back of a compound, your lungs burning. When you stop, he unwraps the bundle. Bronze heads. 2 of them, still gleaming as though the fire refuses to touch them. If they take everything, he gasps, "These must remember for us." You want to ask where to hide them, but he's already gone, swallowed by the smoke. What happens next feels like a nightmare on repeat. British troops march through the broken gates, their boots sinking into centuries of red earth. They load crates with bronzes, masks, plaques, hundreds upon hundreds of them, stacked like loot from a dream they can't understand. The once living city becomes a museum before it's even dead. And here's the surreal part. Some soldiers, so the stories go, tried to wash the bronzes in seawater on their ships home, thinking they were covered in grime. What they didn't realize was that the grime was sacred patina, centuries of touch and time. Imagine scrubbing away history with soap and pride.
Historians still argue whether the 1897 British punitive expedition was retribution, conquest, or theft. But you don't need an argument. You can still smell the burnt palm wood, the silence where laughter once rang. Time folds. You're no longer in the city, but standing in a room of cold white walls and glass cases. The lighting is perfect, clinical, quiet, polite. The same bronze heads stare out at you, their reflections multiplied by museum glass. A small placard below reads, Benin, 16th century, artist unknown. You almost laugh. Unknown? You can still hear Omoregbe's voice, the boys' laughter, the hiss of molten brass. Their names weren't lost, they were erased.
Visitors move past, murmuring about craftsmanship and symmetry. One points at a plaque and says, so modern for its time. You want to tell her it wasn't for its time. It is time. Trapped, shimmering, still breathing faintly under LED lights. Here's the quirky irony. Some European collectors, unsure of how to display their stolen treasures, once used Benin bronzes as umbrella stands or doorstops. The Oba's face holding open a hallway door. You can't decide whether to laugh or cry. And yet, even here, far from home, the bronzes seem alive. You lean closer, and for a moment, in the hum of the museum's ventilation system, you swear you hear it. The faint rhythm of a forge, a ghostly hammer still striking in the distance. The air feels warmer around them, like the metal hasn't finished cooling even after a century. You whisper to one of the plaques, "Do you remember?" And though you know it's impossible, you think the eyes glint back, just for a heartbeat. The guide's voice interrupts your trance, talking about repatriation efforts, ownership debates, restitution politics. Historians still argue whether returning the bronzes can ever repair what was taken. But standing here, it's not a debate, it's an ache. You realize something quietly devastating. The bronzes have done exactly what their creators intended. They have survived everyone, colonizers, kings, and time itself. They have remembered. And just as that thought settles, the scene fades again. The white walls blur into darkness, and once more you're standing in the quiet ruins of Benin City. The air smells of earth and oil. The fires are gone, but under the soil, the memory hums. You kneel, pressing your palm to the ground, and it's warm. Still warm. The forges may have fallen silent, but their ghosts still cast shadows. The wind stirs, carrying the faintest whisper of Omoregbe's voice. Metal is metal. It remembers whoever holds it last. You breathe in the red dust, heavy and ancient, and let the silence settle over you like a final prayer.
The night drifts slower now. The air cools, soft as worn silk. The clang of the hammers fades into memory, replaced by the steady hush of distant crickets and your own heartbeat slowing down. The city that once blazed with bronze light rests beneath a blanket of stars, its walls breathing quietly, as though dreaming of what it once was. You walk through the ruins in your mind, past the empty furnaces, past the scattered clay, past the ghost of a boy smiling beside his beeswax mold. The bronze faces are gone, yes, but not lost. They hover in the quiet air between thought and sleep, glowing faintly in your imagination. Every whisper of wind seems to carry the forge's rhythm. Every cooling breeze feels like breath over molten metal. And in that rhythm, you can still hear the lesson that creation is never permanent, only remembered. That what melts away often returns, harder, brighter, eternal. So you stand there, hands open, letting the warm dust slip through your fingers like the last trace of wax. Somewhere, centuries away, museum lights will shine on what was made here tonight. Somewhere, descendants of the guild will reignite the furnaces, calling back their ancestors with every spark. For now, you just breathe. The city exhales with you. The night folds into stillness. And when you finally close your eyes, the last thing you see is bronze light dancing gently in the dark, alive, remembering, and waiting for the next casting.